Everyone thought Emma and I were perfect together. The couple who laughed at the same jokes, hosted dinner parties that never ended in arguments, smiled for every photograph like we had nothing to hide. Maybe that's what fooled me the most, how easy it was to keep performing even after the feeling was gone. Lately, she'd started answering my questions with smiles instead of words. I convinced myself that silence was peace, not distance. When Lily invited us to her weekend gathering, I told myself it would be good for us, a reminder that we were still the couple everyone envied. I was wrong that night. The house glowed in soft light and laughter. I remember how Emma looked, calm, radiant, and somehow unreachable. She wore the blue dress I once called my favorite. She didn't wear it for me. I knew that when Daniel walked in. He hadn't changed much since college, still the kind of man who owned every room he entered. Confident, easy with words, dangerous in a way people mistake for charm. I hadn't seen him in years. We hugged like old friends, but something in his eyes told me he remembered every story I ever told him, including the ones about Emma. The evening started harmlessly enough. Wine, music, people trading old memories for new gossip. Emma laughed harder than I'd heard in months. At first, I told myself it was good to hear her laugh again. Then I saw who she was laughing with. Daniel stood close, too close. His hand brushed her shoulder, light, casual, like he'd done it 100 times. She didn't flinch. My smile didn't fade either. I just sipped my drink and watched from across the room, pretending not to notice how comfortable they'd become in front of everyone that he called her beautiful. Everyone laughed. He added that she was unforgettable, and everyone laughed again, everyone except me. That word hit differently. It sounded practiced, personal, like it belonged to a conversation I was never part of. I kept my face neutral, but something inside me tightened, a quiet realization forming where jealousy should have been. People moved from group to group, and the night grew louder, warmer. Emma floated through the crowd, always within Daniel's orbit. At one point, I caught her reflection in the glass door. Her eyes followed him when she thought no one was looking. That was when I understood it wasn't a momentary slip, it was a connection already alive, just waiting for permission to show itself. Still, I stayed calm. I told jokes, poured drinks, smiled at Lily's stories. It's easier to hide your pain when everyone else is laughing. The room blurred into fragments, music, voices, perfume, clinking glasses, and through it all, I saw Emma's expression soften whenever Daniel spoke. I remembered the last time she looked at me that way. It had been months, maybe longer. The thought didn't hurt as much as it should have, it just made everything feel real. When Daniel suggested a toast to old friends and good memories, everyone lifted their glasses. I raised mine too, pretending not to notice the look he gave Emma just before he spoke. Some memories, he said, are worth repeating. The room laughed again, unaware of what those words meant to me. I looked at Emma, her eyes flickered with something between guilt and thrill. For a second, I wondered if I should walk out. But I didn't. I wanted to see how far they would go when they thought I wasn't going to stop them. As the night deepened, so did my silence. Emma came over once, asked if I was okay. I said, I'm fine. She smiled faintly, as if relieved that I wasn't asking questions. That was her mistake. People assume silence means peace. They forget it can also mean observation. From across the room, I watched Daniel take another drink, his confidence blooming. The others teased, joked, played harmless games. It all felt distant, like background noise to a story only three people truly understood. I could sense the tension building, subtle but alive, the kind of energy that hides behind laughter before it explodes. That I remember thinking that betrayal never starts big. It starts small, an extra second of eye contact, a shared joke, a laugh too soft to be heard but too real to be ignored. That's how it begins. And that night, I could feel every small beginning adding up to something that was about to change everything. The clock on the wall ticked louder than the music. Someone turned down the lights. Lily announced some game to keep the energy alive, and everyone cheered. Emma laughed, Daniel grinned, and I smiled because that's what people in love are supposed to do. No one noticed the way my hand tightened around the glass or the way I studied their every move, memorizing details I'd pretend to forget later. That I told myself it was just another night. Just another gathering, another harmless evening with friends. I even believed it right up until the moment before it happened. The air shifted, conversations blurred, and for a breath of silence, I saw Daniel glance at Emma with something unmistakable in his eyes. That was when I knew. It wasn't going to stay harmless anymore. Everything was still fine on the surface. People were laughing, music played, the world hadn't fallen apart yet. But I felt it, the kind of stillness that comes before the storm. The kind that tells you life is about to change, and you'll remember the moment forever, not because of what happened, but because of how clearly you saw it coming. And as I looked at Emma across the room, smiling at another man, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals don't shout, they whisper first. Then, when you least expect it, they speak loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter grew louder as the night stretched longer. People had loosened up, their words slurred with wine and easy confidence. I stood in a corner, pretending to scroll through my phone while watching everything unfold. Emma was near the center of the room, glowing under dim lights, her smile effortlessly bright. Daniel stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The kind of closeness that needs no explanation but says too much. I could sense the unspoken rhythm between them. She'd turn slightly toward him when he spoke, and he'd lean in just enough for it to seem natural. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and chose to enjoy the show instead of the truth. Lily, always the host trying to keep the energy alive, clapped her hands and announced they should play something fun. Truth or dare, someone shouted, and a few cheers followed. I didn't participate, I just observed. It was all harmless at first, silly questions, meaningless dares, laughter filling every pause. But then it was Daniel's turn. He looked around the room with that confident smirk he always wore when he knew everyone's eyes were on him. There, he said. The crowd buzzed. Lily grinned, thinking, trying to come up with something bold enough to match his energy. Do something unforgettable, she said finally. Daniel smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. He didn't hesitate, didn't even think. He just turned toward Emma. The room's noise softened into a kind of curious hush. Before anyone could joke or stop him, he walked over, placed his hand lightly on her arm, and kissed her. Not a peck, not something you could laugh off. It was long enough, deep enough, wrong enough for every single person in that room to freeze. The sound vanished. Even the music seemed to cut out. I didn't move. Emma didn't either, not at first. Her eyes stayed closed, her body still. When she finally stepped back, her laugh came too quickly, too forced. "It's just a dare," she said, but her voice trembled. The others started to laugh again, awkwardly, trying to reset the moment, pretending it wasn't what it clearly was. But I saw what they didn't: the way her hands shook, the way she avoided my eyes, the way Daniel looked at her like he'd done something he'd wanted to do for a long time. Every eye eventually turned to me. They expected a reaction. A raised voice, a punch, a broken glass, something to make it easier for them to call it drama instead of betrayal. But I just stood there. Calm. Quiet. I met Daniel's eyes, then hers. And I said it softly, almost politely, "It's okay." The words felt like acid coated in calm. No one spoke after that. The room had gone still again, the kind of stillness that feels like waiting for something terrible to happen. Emma's lips parted like she wanted to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. There's a strange power in silence, how it forces guilt to echo louder than any accusation. I watched her swallow hard, eyes darting around the room, desperate for someone to break the tension. No one did. Even Daniel looked uneasy now, the smirk fading into something like confusion or regret. But I knew that look too. It wasn't regret for the act, just discomfort at being exposed. And that stillness, my mind didn't race. It cleared. Every small suspicion, every quiet distance between us over the past months lined up perfectly like puzzle pieces falling into place. The late-night work calls, the new perfume she said was a gift from a friend, the sudden interest in dressing up when we weren't going anywhere special, all of it made sense now. The kiss wasn't the betrayal, it was the confirmation. I looked at her again, trying to find the woman I once knew. But she wasn't there. Only someone pretending not to panic. I almost felt sorry for her, for how quickly that illusion of perfection had crumbled in front of everyone. Almost. But sympathy died the moment I saw Daniel's hand still resting near her back, a gesture of possession he didn't even bother hiding. Someone finally spoke, Lily, nervous and unsure. "Come on, it was just a game." Her words felt like a weak attempt to patch a hole in a sinking ship. I smiled faintly, nodded, and replied, "Of course. Just a game." But the way I said it made everyone else look away. No one wanted to meet my eyes after that. The laughter returned, half-hearted and uneven, but the night had already changed. There's no real laughter after something like that, just noise pretending to be normal. I finished my drink slowly, every swallow burning more than the last. Emma tried to reach for my hand, whisper something, but I gently pulled away. Not out of anger, just clarity. I didn't need to ask her why. I already knew. People don't cheat because they're tempted, they cheat because something in them has already left. The body just follows later. The night dragged on with forced conversations and uneasy smiles. I stayed long enough to make sure no one could say I'd run away. That's what people expect the hurt ones to do: leave, explode, create a scene that makes everyone else feel justified in their discomfort. I refused to give them that. I wanted them to sit with it, to remember my silence every time they saw her again. As I finally placed my empty glass on the table and turned to leave, I caught Emma watching me with wide, uncertain eyes. Maybe she thought my calm meant forgiveness. Maybe she was praying for it. But forgiveness wasn't even on the table. This wasn't mercy, it was awareness. The kind that strips everything down to its truth. When I stepped out into the cold air, the sound of laughter faded behind me. I could still hear her voice inside, pretending to move on, pretending to control the narrative. But I knew better. She could hide behind explanations, behind games, behind anything she wanted. I'd seen what I needed to see. And while they would spend the rest of the night pretending it was just a mistake, I walked away knowing that a single moment of truth had already rewritten everything. They thought I said it's okay. But what I meant was, it's over. The morning after should have been filled with warmth, with laughter echoing from relatives still lingering in the house, with me holding on to the glow of being newly married. Instead, I carried the heaviness of a secret I had no one to share with. Every glance I gave Ian felt strained, every smile forced. He moved around effortlessly, greeting family members, playing the role of a husband as though nothing weighed on him. That perfect mask of his both fascinated and terrified me. How easily he could bury truths beneath his charm. That I noticed Saad that morning, standing off to the side, his eyes resting on me with a concern he didn't voice. He was Ayan's cousin, close like a brother, someone who had always been kind without stepping too close. But his silence had a shape to it, the kind of silence that carries knowledge it cannot share. Later, when I found a moment alone, he approached me carefully, like someone debating whether to pull a bandage off a wound. His words came hesitant, but they landed like blows. He told me there were things I didn't know about Aya, things that would hurt, but things I deserved to hear. At first, I wanted to run from the conversation. The last thing I wanted was another fracture in the illusion I was already struggling to hold together. But Saad's tone carried no malice, only a reluctant honesty. He told me that even while Ayan had been preparing to marry me, he hadn't let go of another woman. The relationship hadn't ended when it should have. It bled into our engagement, kept alive in secret meetings, hidden conversations, late-night calls that family never noticed. My chest constricted as the words sank in. Part of me clung to the possibility that Saad was mistaken, but deep inside, I knew he wasn't. His eyes didn't lie, his voice didn't waver. I asked if it was Sarah, my mind desperate to fit the pieces into one betrayal instead of two. But his silence told me otherwise. This wasn't Sarah, it was someone else. A woman I didn't know, someone outside the walls of my world, yet someone who had been close enough to occupy the place I thought was mine alone. That I felt the ground slipping beneath me. First Sarah, now this shadowy figure I couldn't even name. The betrayal spread wider, growing roots into places I couldn't reach. I tried to steady my breathing, to keep myself from unraveling in front of Saad, but inside I was collapsing. He didn't say more, only muttered that he had kept quiet to protect the family, to avoid scandal. But watching me now, he could no longer carry it in silence. Then he left me with the weight of his confession, leaving me to drown in questions with no answers. That night, I searched. While Ayan stepped into the shower, I looked through his belongings with trembling hands, not sure if I wanted proof or reassurance. What I found was worse than I expected: another phone, tucked away in the drawer beneath neatly folded clothes. A phone I had never seen before. The messages were there, threads of conversations with a name saved only as an initial. Words of affection, late-night promises, talk of missed moments and secret meetings. Some messages were weeks old, others from just days before the wedding. The kind of intimacy that shouldn't exist outside the vows we were meant to share. My body shook as I put it back exactly as I found it, every nerve in me screaming. The walls around me seemed to close in, the room colder than it had been a moment before. When Ayan emerged, smiling, casual, wrapping his arms around me like nothing had shifted, I almost screamed. How could he look at me with such ease while carrying such deceit? His touch burned with questions I couldn't ask, his smile carved wounds I couldn't reveal. I tried subtle confrontations. I asked about loyalty, about honesty, speaking in hypotheticals, hoping he would flinch, hoping he would break the act. But he didn't. His answers were smooth, measured, almost rehearsed. His denial of any wrongdoing was wrapped in laughter, as though my questions were naive. He kissed my forehead and told me to stop worrying, that love was enough. And yet, the more he spoke, the less I believed. Every moment with him now carried a dual edge. His gestures of affection no longer comforted me, they mocked me. The promises he had made at the altar, so grand and public, now felt hollow. My heart replayed Saad's confession, the secret phone, the messages from a woman I couldn't even picture. What was I to Ayan, a partner, or simply a mask he wore to please his family while his heart wandered elsewhere? I lay awake again that night, my body stiff beside his, unable to surrender to rest. I thought of how marriage was meant to be built on trust, on truth, and how mine was already drowning in lies. The past with Sarah was a wound, but this ongoing deception was a disease spreading into the very core of what we were supposed to be. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the distance between us wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Ayan was hiding behind walls he had built long before me, and I was just beginning to see how high they really were. By the time dawn broke, my mind was filled with a chilling certainty. Love wasn't the foundation of this marriage. Secrets were. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. This is section 2, almost equals 770 words. Shall I continue with section 3, 760 words, to complete the story arc with the final shocking secret? Emma reached out after days of silence, her messages short, apologetic, full of words that no longer mattered. I didn't reply. There's nothing left to say once the truth has already spoken for both people. She sent voice notes, long explanations about loneliness, confusion, how things just got out of control. But infidelity isn't an accident. It's a decision repeated until it feels like need. Every sentence she sent sounded like an excuse dressed as regret. I listened once, then deleted them all. It wasn't anger that stopped me from responding. It was acceptance. Some people don't deserve confrontation, they deserve absence. Daniel never reached out. Of course he didn't. Men like him don't apologize. They move on, proud of the chaos they leave behind. I heard through friends that he'd stopped coming to gatherings, that his charm had started to wear thin after that night. People whispered about what happened, their versions colored with curiosity and gossip. I stayed silent, let them guess. Truth doesn't need defending when the evidence is self-inflicted. That I moved into a small apartment near the edge of the city, a place without memories, without traces of us. It felt strange at first, waking up alone, eating in silence, hearing no familiar footsteps in the hallway. But soon that quiet started to feel like peace instead of emptiness. I began to understand that losing someone who lied to you isn't really loss, it's correction. I started working late, walking more, relearning how to live without shaping every decision around another person's comfort. Freedom has its own loneliness, but it's cleaner. It doesn't rot from within. Weeks passed before Emma showed up unannounced. She stood at the door holding the same wedding ring I'd left behind, her eyes swollen from nights of crying. I didn't invite her in. She said she missed me, that she'd ended everything with Daniel, that she wanted to start over. I could see she believed the right words might rebuild what she broke. But there's no version of love that survives public humiliation and private deceit. I told her that what she wanted wasn't reconciliation, it was relief from guilt. She wanted me to make her feel like a good person again. I wouldn't. She cried harder, asked if there was someone else. I laughed, not cruelly, just tiredly. No, I said, I don't need someone else to move on. I just needed to stop pretending you were enough. The sentence hurt us both, but it was true. Love can't live where trust is buried. She tried to argue, said people make mistakes, that she still loved me. I told her love without loyalty is just habit. She didn't know how to answer that. Eventually, she left the ring on the table and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. After she left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the ring. It wasn't anger I felt, it was gratitude. That little circle of metal had once symbolized forever, but now it only reminded me how fragile promises are. I put it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as proof of survival. Every scar deserves a place to rest. And the weeks that followed, I found myself revisiting moments I'd once ignored. The way she stopped meeting my eyes during conversations, how laughter between us had turned into polite smiles, how silence at dinner had stretched longer each night. The truth was, the marriage hadn't died from a single act, it had been dying quietly, drip by drip, and I had just refused to see it. The kiss didn't end us, it exposed what was already gone. People ask if I miss her. Sometimes, yes, but not in the way they think. I miss the idea of her, the version I created when I believed we were unbreakable. But ideas don't apologize, they just fade. What I have now is clarity, and that's worth more than comfort built on lies. That I've learned that not every betrayal deserves confrontation. Sometimes the best response is to outgrow the version of yourself that tolerated it. I stopped seeking closure, stopped needing answers. Closure isn't something they give you, it's something you decide to take. I built mine from silence, from the discipline of walking away without leaving pieces of myself behind. Months later, Lily called. She said Emma was moving out of town, trying to start over. I wished her well. Not because I wanted her happy, but because I no longer wanted her to matter. Letting go isn't forgiveness, it's emotional economy. You simply stop investing where there's no return. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking at the city lights blinking against the dark. Somewhere out there, she was probably staring at a different skyline, replaying the same mistakes in her head. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or grief. I felt nothing, and it was perfect. Nothing meant peace. Nothing meant freedom. That I realized then that people think betrayal ruins you, but it doesn't. It refines you. It burns away illusion, forces you to rebuild with truth instead of comfort. I didn't lose a wife, I shed a lie. The man I was before that night would have fought to fix things. The man I am now just smiles at the memory and says, "Thank you for leaving first." Because sometimes the worst thing someone does to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. That I poured a drink, raised it to the quiet, and whispered to myself, "It's okay." This time, it wasn't an act. It wasn't a line to hide pain. It was real. The kind of okay that comes when you finally understand that endings aren't punishments, they're permissions. Permissions to start over, to breathe again, to love differently. The kind that reminds you, peace is not what you find in someone else's arms. It's what you reclaim when you finally stop asking why they let go.